If you have a car, I would recommend getting rid of that.
Did you hear that? Alex Hormozi, with a net worth of over $250 million, speaking from his private jet, just made car-free living cool as a path to wealth. What's going on here? What's this got to do with sustainable cities? Not to worry, as a permaculture urbanist, I've got you covered. In today's episode, we'll discuss how frugality creates wealth, how you can save money by going green, and how cities can ride this green wave to absolute abundance. Welcome to Edonicity, best practices for sustainably abundant cities. The fact that frugality creates wealth can get lost in today's social media landscape because pretty much every social media channel crams in your face 24/7 the idea that there's this beautiful exotic life out there that millions of people are living just by buying the right brands or taking the right courses and following the right formula to wealth. As someone who was caught by that bug in various ways more than 30 years ago, I get really sick of it. So Hormozi's video was a breath of fresh air. Wealth can come from many possible places. Innovation for sure can drive wealth. But innovation is based on experimentation, and most experiments fail. By now, most of us are familiar with the Thomas Edison story, where it took him thousands of failed experiments to invent the incandescent light bulb. A slightly more recent example came from Timothy Ferriss's 2009 book, The 4-Hour Workweek, where he pointed out that fewer than 5% of books published sell more than 5,000 copies. Think about that for a second. Teams of publishers and editors with decades of combined experience fail more times than not. This is the essence of innovation. Trying to create something new and market it and get people to buy it is really hard. Most things that get dreamed up are things that people just don't want at the end of the day. And the process of creation and marketing is very, very costly. In his 1996 book, Max Strategy, Dale Dauten makes this personal in the form of a thought experiment. He asks, would you risk $100,000 on a coin toss to get $1 million? For the vast majority of Americans, the answer to this is no. 65% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck. They can't take this bet because they can't afford even one failure. Most of us are one accident, illness, or robbery away from complete disaster. So what Hormozi is saying in this video is that if you don't have infinite amounts of money to burn, you must conserve resources. You must spend a lot less than you earn. In other words, he's talking about frugality.
I saved as much as I could when I had my job so I could start a gym. That was a big risk. But I lived on almost nothing in Baltimore so that I could take that swing. I sold those businesses and then lost everything 2 more times. If I had had to go into debt just to live, then I would have never been able to take those second and third shots. You will increase your shots on goal by living risk-free or low risk in your personal life. Able to fail more. Like, I failed more times than you. I'm telling you, I had 9 failed businesses, I have 7 failed partnerships. I have many failures. But the only reason I can get back up is because I don't have this big thing that I have to take care of. I can do that. I just have rules on it right now.
Are you getting this? This is not an anomaly. Steve Jobs, founder of Apple, went barefoot so much in his early days that he preferred going barefoot later on. Even Elon Musk lived in his office, slept under his desk, and showered at the local YMCA when he was first starting out. What Maz is talking about here is the difference between trying to keep up appearances with everybody else and the stress that that brings versus trying to build up a solid enough buffer of resources so that you can make some bold moves without excessive worry. And there's another level to this that applies to cities, as we'll see in a moment.
This is where saving money makes you money, is that it allows you to see the opportunities around you.
Here's where our entrepreneurial values align really well with our green values. Let's look into the tactics of how to make that happen. How can you save money by going green? It's becoming increasingly popular for people to dine out or order takeout, but that's expensive. I did a little calculating, comparing even the cheapest fast food to home cooking, and found that I could save about $2,000 a year. I've been cooking vegan for more than 20 years, and yes, I even keep a recipe book that isn't anywhere near complete. I have quite a few recipes in other files. And the photo in the background here is from a grocery haul that I made in Columbus. I'm packing it in the basket on the bike that you see on the left. From my experience with careful budget tracking, home cooking will save you at least $2,000 a year, and in many cases up to twice that versus even the cheapest of fast food. And a vegan diet will save you another couple $1,000s a year, again from personal experience. Of course, these activities benefit the planet. Home cooking reduces land use because there's that much car and parking infrastructure. It also reduces packaging waste in the case of fast food, and of course fuel use to get to and from the fast food place. Similarly, a vegan diet dramatically reduces the amount of land, water, and energy required to feed a person. Now, permaculturists will quibble with this, saying that in a well-designed permaculture system, you can boost your yield with some food animals in the system. And this is true, but the vast majority of food that we eat does not come from permaculture right now. So a vegan diet benefits the earth by directly reducing our land use, water use, and energy use. An apartment, based on my personal experience living in apartments in 9 cities and owning houses in 2 cities, is that apartments save at least $4,000 a year, as well as land, energy, and material, compared to standalone detached homes. And finally,
If you have multiple cars, downgrade to one. Layla and I have lived with one car for years.
you don't have to take my word for the value of going car-free. Bankrate.com has done it for you, and they estimate that in the United States, the average cost of even used cars, now they're talking about safe, fully insured used cars being driven typical mileage by people in their prime, costs at least $12,950 a year. When you subtract the cost of a year's worth of transit tickets, typically $800 to $1,000, going car-free can save a person or a family up to $12,000 a year without compromising safety. In fact, mass transit is 17 to 50 times safer than driving a car. See the links below in the description for the sources for that. And of course, going car-free in a city dramatically reduces land use when you remove the parking, streets, service infrastructure, and setbacks that are all architectural responses to cars. And of course, public transit and active transit, walking and bicycling, use 10 times less energy. In another video, I've shown how metros and buses use far less land, energy, and material than cars do, and I'll link that in the description below as well. Okay, here's some more ways to go green and save money on rent. Of course, there's having roommates, as Hormozi mentioned, joining rental co-ops, getting involved in a car sharing scheme, thrifting, getting your books and music from libraries, going to parks, even cooking rotations with roommates or neighbors. Been there, done that, journaled all of it, and if there's interest, maybe I'll pull the journals together and write a book about going green and saving money. Here's another view of Kailash Eco Village from our previous episode. There were a few comments about how cheap, hippie, and down-market Kailash looked, but places like this are where the innovation in green living is happening these days. It's kind of like the home computer industry before Apple computers got started. Everything was happening in academia, in people's garages, and in their living rooms. In my view, green living is on the verge of its Apple computer moment. But until we hit that tipping point, green lifestyle innovation is happening again in academia and in villages like Kailash. And by the way, there's more news about Kailash that I'll be sharing with you in the next episode. Be sure you're subscribed so you don't miss that.
A lot of times in the beginning, it's about elimination, not addition. It's the expenses that you're going to get out of your life.
This is such a welcome break from the usual influencer nonsense about dissing your 9-to-5 job and taking their course and buying their stuff and somehow leaping into your beautiful alternate reality. And I get it. Financial uncertainty is really intense these days. I mean, just a couple of years back, we had inflation peaking at 9% and interest rates on mortgages about doubling. And in my case, in 2023, rent went up 33%. Believe me, I've been there. When I was a teen in the 80s, inflation was running as high as 14.8%. And when I was looking for apartments in the mid-90s, mortgages were running about 9%, just a tiny bit higher than it was at its peak in 2023. In times like this, the economists talk in abstractions, but on the street, the fear and uncertainty are very real. In my university job, I had 2% raises in 6 years, during which time consumer prices went up about 8%. It felt like I was falling behind. The evening news was filled with talk of getting rid of pensions and Social Security. We were seeing more homeless people on the streets every day. I tried to buy the cheapest studio or one-bedroom apartment I could find, but the banks kept turning me down. This financial uncertainty took a huge toll on my relationship at the time. The pressure to find a financial shortcut was intense. And I look around today, and the fears are the same with millennials and Gen Z, but magnified by social media. I bailed on my university job, but if I had stayed, I would be retired by now with a pension, full medical, and a monster 401k. Instead, I job hopped, ended up starting my own business, and never saw the same level of security again. It's such a breath of fresh air to see someone get a little more real about this. Now, I'm not going to play his whole video here, but he does get into a lot of details about personal finance priorities and investments. And it was so timely for me because I recently put together some notes for some young people in my life, soon to be starting out in the working world, to help them avoid some really big mistakes that I had made early on in my life. But Hormozi covers much of the same ground, although perhaps a little bit more extreme and entrepreneurially focused than some of the young people in my life might want to be.
If you're renting, you want to downgrade to something that's cheaper, as cheap as you possibly can.
One of the things I hope to cover in this channel in the new year, not just eco-villages, but also rental co-ops. And there are some really good deals to be had in such living situations throughout the country, even in today's crazy housing and rental market. Now look, to real innovators, this is old news. People who are really trying to launch new products, new services in the world, get really serious about cutting their costs as much as possible. And cities need to understand this. There is a green wave throughout the world, which coincides with a wave of innovation. And cities can ride that wave to total abundance. How can they do that? Well, first of all, by building mixed-use, multifamily, transit-oriented development so that people aren't dependent on cars. Well, it's true that Alex Hormozi did not go car-free in his quest for wealth. That strategy was identified in one of the more popular comments to his video. One hack he didn't mention is maybe paying more for rent to live in a walkable area where most daily needs can be met on foot or bike. Going car-free is one of the biggest hacks in today's economy. No gas, no insurance, no maintenance. So much money freed up right there. And people just jumped on that. But of course, this is a very controversial issue. A lot of people were very passionate, saying that they prefer the car-free life. There's other people who said, well, just get a cheap car. People who point out that they like the idea, but they're in a country where they can barely find any public transportation to get to their office. There's this pent-up need for car-free living, especially among frugal, green, innovative types of people. It's not that innovation doesn't happen in people living posh lifestyles, but in my experience living rich and poor, people put a lot more energy into impressing each other when they're living posh and a lot more energy into innovating when they're not.
Do you want to look rich or do you want to be rich? And I think a lot of you guys, if you're being honest with yourselves, want to look rich.
How then can cities ride this green wave of potential innovation to become much more abundant places to live? They can support car-free lifestyles by becoming much more walkable, bikeable, transit-friendly places to live. Now, in existing cities, this can seem really hard to do because there's so much car traffic. And when you go to add transit, people immediately say, hey, wait, that's going to make things much worse. There's about as much congestion as we can stand right now. But look, traffic just doesn't generally get better, at least not in the long haul. Cities that are growing are going to have worse traffic, even when they put in transit, and even when that transit is successful, because the growth is going to cram the streets. So the thing that cities must do, and this is very tough, is carve public and active transit out of existing car infrastructure. This means putting in tram lines, putting in bicycle lanes with priority signals, as they've done in the Netherlands, building denser cities with more uses, where you can live closer to more services, shopping, and amenities. If that seems a really big step, cities can also start by encouraging housing co-ops, especially rental co-ops, as well as eco-village apartment conversions where people can live cheap and save enough to innovate. The idea is to attract talent by becoming places where it's easier for people to both innovate and become talented. And if they want to take it to the next level, they can build quality housing as Singapore did when it was dirt poor in 1965 as a deliberate strategy to become a wealthier nation. Now, Singapore is an ownership model, but to go even deeper in this direction, cities can develop co-op and co-living social housing, as Vienna has done for over 100 years now. This is high-quality housing for a large fraction of the population, as I've written about in my book, Housing in 4 Cities. See the links below. Singapore used housing as a wealth creation strategy. Vienna built social housing to increase the housing inventory and dramatically reduce the cost of living in the city. And either one of these alternatives would be a great next step for any city. Thanks as always to the wonderful patrons for supporting this work. You can learn more about Edonicity in this video, and you can find a copy of the Edonicity reference design in the links below. Take care, stay green, see you next time.